My mother didn't even lower her voice when she said it. I know you paid off the $680,000 mortgage. But we're gifting the house to your brother as his graduation present. I was still holding the phone when she added almost cheerfully. And you're not invited to the party. The room around me went quiet in that sharp, unreal way, like every year I'd spent saving that house evaporated at once. Drop a comment and let me know where you're listening from, and what time it is for you right now. I'd love to know who's part of our community. And tell me, have you ever been the one paying the bills, only to be treated like a stranger in your own home? The call ended, but the silence didn't. I didn't scream. I didn't throw my phone. In my line of work, panic is just inefficiency. I stood in my office on the 34th floor, looking out over the Seattle skyline. From up here, everything looked orderly. The cranes at the port moved containers with rhythmic precision. The traffic on Interstate 5 was a steady stream of red and white lights. Supply chains, that is what I understand. Input, process, output. If a shipment is contaminated, you quarantine it. If a supplier breaches contract, you cut them off. It is not emotional, it is operational. My name is Cora, and I am 29 years old. I manage logistics for one of the largest tech firms in the world. My job is to anticipate disasters before they happen, to see the bottleneck before the traffic stops. But somehow, I missed the bottleneck in my own family. Or maybe I didn't miss it. Maybe I just chose to ignore the data because I wanted the output to be love. The house in question is a sprawling Victorian in Queen Anne. A glass castle, my father likes to call it. It has views of the Sound, original crown molding, and a wraparound porch that costs $5,000 a year just to maintain. It is the kind of house that screams old money. The kind of house that says, "We belong here." But my parents, Cynthia and Robert, don't have old money. They don't have any money. They have a failing boutique winery that produces more debt than Pinot Noir, and a consultancy firm with 0 clients. What they have is an aesthetic, and for the last 5 years, I have been the invisible infrastructure keeping that aesthetic from collapsing. $1.25 million. That is the real number. The mortgage wasn't $680,000, that was just the principal. With interest, taxes, and the emergency bridge loans my father begged for when the winery's roof leaked, the total investment I have poured into that house is over $1 million. I paid it quietly, I paid it monthly. I paid it so they wouldn't lose the only thing that gave them an identity. I looked at my reflection in the office window. My suit was tailored, sharp, monochromatic. My apartment downtown is the same, clean lines, modern furniture, nothing unnecessary. I built a life that was the opposite of my parents' chaotic pretension. I thought I was buying peace. I thought if I handled the bills, the chaos wouldn't touch me. I treated my family like a volatile asset class, high risk, but necessary for the portfolio. But my mother's voice was still echoing in my head. Gifting the house to Austin. My brother. Austin is 25. He is charming, handsome, and has changed his major 6 times. He is currently finding himself while planning an engagement to a girl whose last name is on half the buildings in downtown Seattle. And that was it, wasn't it? The house wasn't just a gift. It was bait. They needed Austin to look like he brought something to the table. They needed him to look like a landed gentleman, not the unemployed son of bankrupt wine hobbyists. So they took my asset, the roof I paid for, and they wrapped it in a bow for him. And me? I was uninvited, not because of space, but because I didn't fit the narrative. I was too corporate, too sharp, too much of a reminder that the money had to come from somewhere. I was the engine room, and you don't invite the mechanics to the captain's dinner. I sat down at my desk and opened my laptop. My hands were steady. I didn't feel sad. I felt a cold, clarifying rage. It was the feeling of a ledger finally balancing, but not in the way they expected. I opened a secure folder on my drive labeled Project Glass. Inside were 5 years of bank transfers, property tax receipts, and email confirmations. But there was one document that mattered more than all the rest. A document my parents had signed 5 years ago, desperate and weeping, when the bank was threatening foreclosure. They probably didn't even read it, they just saw the check. But I read it, I wrote it. I pulled up my contact list and scrolled past mom and dad. I stopped at a name I hadn't called in years, but kept for exactly this kind of contingency. Uncle Andrew. My father's estranged brother. The corporate shark who hated my parents' pretension almost as much as I did. I pressed call. It rang once. Andrew, I said when he picked up. My voice didn't shake. It's Cora. We have a breach. A breach? His voice was gravel over a low hum of background noise, probably the server room of his firm, or the interior of a very expensive car. Define breach. Did they miss a payment? Because I told you, the moment they miss 1 month, they didn't miss a payment. I cut in. They are transferring the deed. They are gifting the house to Austin. There was a silence on the line, followed by a short, sharp bark of a laugh. Gift? They can't gift what they don't own. They are underwater, Cora. Unless... Wait. Why now? Austin is 25 and has never held a job longer than a semester. It is an engagement present, I said, my fingers flying across my keyboard, pulling up social media profiles I usually kept blocked. He is marrying into the Sterling family. Sterling? As in, Sterling Tech? Andrew whistled. That is out of his league, way out. Exactly, I said, staring at the screen. That is why they need the house. On my monitor, the digital footprint of my brother's life unfolded in high definition. Photos of Austin on a sailboat in the San Juans. Austin at a gala in a tuxedo that I knew my father had put on a credit card. And there she was, Eloise Sterling. Blonde, polished, the kind of girl who grew up knowing she would inherit the earth. Suddenly, the logistics made perfect sense. The house wasn't just a gift, it was collateral. It was bait. My parents needed Austin to look like he brought something to the table. They couldn't send him into a marriage with a tech heiress empty-handed. He needed to look like a landed gentleman, a scion of Queen Anne society, not the unemployed son of bankrupt wine hobbyists. They were using the house, my asset, the roof I paid for, to secure a marriage alliance that would save their social status. It was a merger-acquisition strategy, and I was the liquidated subsidiary. I leaned back in my chair, the leather creaking in the silence of my office. A familiar, cold ache settled in my chest, but I pushed it down, analyzing it through the lens of the data before me. Why him? Why, after 5 years of me saving them from ruin, was I the one cast out while he was crowned king? It wasn't just favoritism, it was physics. My mother, Cynthia, is a woman composed entirely of reflections. She lives for the image of things, not the substance. When she looks at Austin, charming, handsome, unburdened by the reality of labor, she sees the life she believes she deserves. She sees the old money fantasy reflected back at her. Austin is her mirror. He projects the image she wants the world to see. Ease, grace, inherited wealth. Then there is me. I am the shadow. I am the one who knows the bank account balance is negative. I am the one who knows the roof leaks, and the vintage wines are turning to vinegar. When she looks at me, she doesn't see a daughter. She sees the debt. She sees the work. She sees the ugly, grinding reality that sustains her fantasy. I am the evidence of her failure. And you don't invite the evidence to the garden party? You keep the shadow in the basement where it belongs, supporting the foundation so the mirror can shine upstairs. Cora? Andrew's voice snapped me back to the present. If they try to transfer that title, they trigger the acceleration clause. But we need to move fast. If the Sterlings think that asset is clear, this gets messy.
It won't get messy, I said, my voice dropping an octave, devoid of any warmth. It is going to be surgical.
You want to stop the transfer? No, I said. I want to foreclose. Andrew paused. Foreclosure is nuclear, Cora. You do that, and you humiliate them in front of the in-laws. You destroy the wedding. You burn the family bridge down to the pilings. I looked at the invitation graphic on Austin's Instagram. An engagement garden party, Saturday, 2 p.m. They didn't just burn the bridge, Andrew, I said, closing the laptop. They uninvited the engineer who built it. Fair enough, he said, and I could hear the smile in his voice. Come to my office tomorrow. Bring the ledger. It is time to call in the debt. I will be there at 8, I said. Uncle Andrew's office is on the 42nd floor of the Columbia Center, 8 floors higher than mine. It smells like mahogany, espresso, and billable hours. When I walked in at 8 a.m., sharp, he was already waiting, a single file folder centered on his glass desk. Coffee? He asked, gesturing to the silver service. Black, I said. Let's review the asset. Andrew smiled, a razor-thin expression that didn't reach his eyes. He opened the folder. Inside wasn't a deed in the traditional sense. It was a complex web of debt acquisition documents. Your parents think you have been paying their mortgage for the last 5 years, Andrew said, tapping the paper. They think you were sending checks to Wells Fargo, like a dutiful daughter keeping the wolves at bay. But they never read the fine print of the restructuring agreement I had them sign when you bailed them out. They don't read, I said, taking a sip of the bitter coffee. They just sign where the money is. Exactly. You didn't pay the mortgage, Cora. The trust bought the mortgage. He spun the document around so I could see the header. Assignment of debt and lien holder rights. Technically, the bank doesn't own the house. The trust does. You didn't pay off their debt. You acquired it. You are the lender. I looked at the signatures at the bottom, my parents' scrawled names, desperate and messy. So, they aren't owners gifting a house, I said, the logic clicking into place like a container locking onto a chassis. They are borrowers in default, attempting to transfer collateral they don't own. Precisely, Andrew said. The moment they file a quitclaim deed to Austin, they trigger the due on sale clause. Since they can't pay the $1,250,000 principal, the trust has the right to immediate foreclosure. No grace period, no negotiation. We take the keys. I stared at the numbers on the page. $1,250,000. For a long time, I tried to calculate the ROI on that money. Why did I spend it? Why did I pour a fortune into a house I hated, for people who treated me like a utility bill? It wasn't love. I knew that now. It was the cost of silence. I didn't pay that mortgage to keep a roof over their heads. I paid it to keep them away from mine. Every check I wrote was a fee for my autonomy. As long as I paid, they didn't call me screaming about bankruptcy. As long as I paid, I didn't have to visit. I didn't have to listen to my mother cry about her social standing, or watch my father drink himself into a stupor over failed business ideas. I was paying a subscription fee for my own freedom. I bought the right to be left alone. I bought the right to build my career without their chaos spilling into my lobby. The cost of silence, I murmured. That is what this was. I was paying them to be quiet. And now? Andrew asked, watching me closely. Now they broke the contract, I said. They tried to use my silence against me. They tried to take the asset I was maintaining and give it to the liability. I stood up and walked to the window. The city below was waking up, a grid of gray and steel. I thought about the engagement party later today. The old money aesthetic. The garden, the champagne. The lies my mother would be telling the Sterling family about her generational wealth. Foreclose, I said, turning back to Andrew. Initiate the proceedings immediately. It is Saturday, Andrew noted. Courts are closed. But, he pulled a second document from the folder. I have a process server on retainer who specializes in urgent notification. He can serve the notice of default and the acceleration of debt in person. The party starts at 2, I said. Have him arrive at 3. Let them get a few glasses of champagne in. Let Austin brag to his fiancée about his new house. Andrew's smile widened. You want to humiliate them? No, I said, picking up my purse. Humiliation is emotional. I want to liquidate the asset. If they can't pay the debt, they get evicted. It is just business. I will make the call, Andrew said. Where will you be? I have a date with a real estate listing, I lied. I am going to find a place that doesn't have ghosts. I walked out of the office. The elevator ride down was fast. My heart wasn't racing. My hands weren't shaking. I felt the specific, weightless sensation of a contract finally being fulfilled. They wanted the house? Fine. They could have the foreclosure that came with it. At 3 o'clock, the The Queen Anne house was bathed in the kind of golden light that photographers charge extra for. From my parked car down the street, I could see the party in full swing. Waiters circulated with trays of hors d'oeuvres. A string quartet played softly in the corner of the garden. Austin was standing by the fountain, holding a glass of champagne, laughing with Eloise Sterling and her parents. He looked exactly like the part he was playing, the carefree heir to a comfortable fortune. My mother, Cynthia, was in her element. She moved between groups of guests, gesturing expansively at the house, undoubtedly telling stories about its history, about how she'd personally overseen the renovations, about how it was a symbol of our family's enduring legacy. She was selling a fantasy, and everyone was buying it. I watched for a moment longer, feeling a strange detachment. It was a beautiful scene. It was also a lie. And in about 2 minutes, the truth was going to arrive in a mid-sized sedan. Right on schedule, a gray Ford Taurus pulled up to the curb. A man in a cheap suit got out. He didn't look at the garden or the guests. He checked a clipboard, adjusted his tie, and walked straight past the private party sign at the gate. This was the process server Andrew had hired. He wasn't there to be polite. He was there to be effective. He bypassed my parents, who were busy charming a local politician near the buffet. He headed straight for Austin. The music seemed to falter as he approached. Austin looked confused, then annoyed, as the man stopped in front of him. I saw the brief exchange, the man asking a question, Austin nodding hesitantly. Then the man handed him a thick envelope. Austin took it, looking around as if waiting for a punchline. He opened the envelope. Even from a distance, I saw his posture stiffen. He pulled out the papers. The notice of default, the acceleration of debt. The foreclosure notice. What is this? Austin's voice carried over the quiet garden. The string quartet stopped playing. My mother rushed over, her smile tight and strained. Austin, darling, not now. We are celebrating. She tried to take the papers from him. To smooth things over. To hide the evidence before anyone noticed. But the process server wasn't done. Mr. Dawson, he announced, loud enough for the Sterling family to hear clearly. This property is under active foreclosure due to a breach of the Shadow lien held by the Cora Dawson Trust. You have 30 days to vacate. The silence that followed was absolute. It wasn't the polite silence of a lull in conversation. It was the shocked, suffocating silence of a room where all the oxygen had just been sucked out. Mr. Sterling stepped forward. Foreclosure? He asked, looking from Austin to my parents. I thought this house was free and clear. A graduation gift. My father, Robert, tried to laugh it off. It is a misunderstanding. Just a clerical error. We will sort it out on Monday. It is not an error, the process server said, turning to leave. The debt was called in this morning. The transfer of deed triggered the clause. The bank, well, the trust, now owns the property. He walked away, leaving my family standing in the ruin of their perfect afternoon. The illusion shattered. The glass castle hadn't just cracked, it had exploded, and everyone was covered in the shards. I started my car and drove away before anyone could spot me. I didn't need to see the rest. The math had been done. The ledger was balanced. The engagement didn't last the weekend. The Sterlings are business people. They understand risk assessment. When a prospective in-law's primary asset turns out to be a foreclosed liability held by an estranged sister, that is not a red flag, it is a deal-breaker. They pulled the plug on the wedding with the same efficiency I used to pull the plug on the house. Austin didn't just lose the property, he lost the future he thought he was entitled to. Without the old money backdrop, he was just a 25-year-old with a liberal arts degree and a mountain of family debt. My mother tried to call me exactly 43 times in the 48 hours following the party. I didn't answer a single one. I didn't listen to the voicemails. I simply forwarded them to Uncle Andrew's paralegal to log as evidence of harassment if we needed a restraining order. It was cold, yes. But heat requires energy. And I was done fueling their fire. The eviction process was standard. Uncle Andrew handled the filings. My parents, stripped of their glass castle and their social standing, had no funds to fight it. They moved into a 2-bedroom rental in a suburb 30 miles south of the city, a place where no one cares about their vintage wine collection or their family lineage. It is a perfectly adequate life, the kind most people have. It is just not the life they felt they were owed. I never stepped foot inside the Queen Anne house again. I hired a staging company to pack up their belongings and a real estate agent to list it. In this market, a historic Victorian with water views doesn't sit long. It sold in 6 days, over asking, to a young family from California who loved the charm. They didn't know about the screaming matches in the kitchen or the silent treatments in the hallway. To them, it was just a house. To me, it was equity. After paying off the legal fees and the taxes, the net proceeds were substantial. I didn't put it in a trust. I didn't save it for a rainy day. I used it to buy a condo in downtown Seattle. Glass, steel, concrete, it has no history. It has no ghosts. It is stark, modern, and completely mine. Sitting on my balcony now, watching the ferries cut across the Sound, I realized something about the ledger I have been keeping all these years. I always thought I was paying a debt. I thought if I gave enough, worked enough, and fixed enough, the balance would eventually tip in my favor, and they would love me. But you can't audit love. And you can't negotiate with people who see you as a resource, not a person. I cut the supply line. The logistics are finally optimized. I am no longer the shadow supporting the mirror. I am the architect of my own life. And for the first time in 29 years, the foundation is solid. Sometimes, the only way to save yourself is to let the house burn. If you've ever had to be the villain in their story to be the hero in yours, hit subscribe. You're safe here.